Okay, great. Well, welcome to our TPG Leadership session, where we're going to be talking about how does the CEO manage a team. And just quickly, I'll introduce my co-host from Australia, Mr. Peter Baker, who has worked a tremendous amount at an international level. He's been a divisional head of HR for Procter & Gamble. He's been one of 3 global CHROs for Maersk Shipping. He's been the group CHRO for First Abu Dhabi Bank, and he's currently the vice president of people and culture for Plastic Bank. Please welcome Mr. Peter Baker.
Thank you, Shane, and thank you, everybody. It's really great to be with you here today. It's great to learn about this important topic. I'm looking forward to contributing, and it's great to be led here by Shane, one of the Middle East's premier executive search consultants, or headhunters as we call them. Shane will be leading us through in his high energy way some of the key topics that he faces as a search consultant. And today we'll really be talking about that team management element and how to assess that in a CEO. Now, for all of us here, we realize that many of us are not assessing for CEOs, but we might have the ambition to become one. And so this content here hopefully creates some stimulus around the skills necessary to become a great chief executive. So looking forward to working with Shane over the next hour to bring this content to life.
Okay, great. Thanks, Pete, for that. And I just want to make sure my sound is okay. And so this is a critical skill that we're testing for is, can your CEO manage a team? And that's different than leading a team, which we talked about last session. And what are some of the signs that your CEO is managing a team effectively? And I'll start by giving you a couple examples of when you see some of these behaviors. You can definitely feel that the team is being managed properly. So here is 2 examples. Is the sound all right? There's 2 examples here where, if you are from North America, this is maybe a bit of a North American centric example, but on the back of your pickup truck, customers will go and buy these decals of Calvin, the cartoon, and actually have him peeing on the competitor brand. So this is what we call customer ownership, where the customer is actually in the market, being the custodian of your brand, maybe even attacking your competitors on your behalf, taking on part of the work stream. And so when we say ownership, what does that mean? That's when the customer starts to take on part of the work stream from the company. And in this sense, the customer is actually marketing the brand. So they're taking over part of the marketing function. They're taking over some marketing activities. And obviously, they're not being paid for that. And this is where they really start to take ownership of the brand. And this starts customer ownership. The what? Oh, am I not sharing? One second here. My slides are not visible, is what I've been told.
It's a blank screen, but the next one is queued up, Shane. Oh, there you go.
Okay. Okay, great. So here's a really good example where the customer is starting to promote the brand. I don't know if anyone has seen this, where you actually have a Ford truck peeing on a Chevy. And this is the kind of behavior that maybe it's not exact behavior that you want, but you want to start to see your customers taking ownership of your brand. And that starts with employee ownership. What are the levers that a CEO can use to try to foster employee ownership? Just to give you another example of what this might look like is where you actually see people tattooing the brand on their own skin. This is really the acme of customer ownership. And I think we've all seen the Harley Davidson tattoos. Maybe some of the other ones might be a bit unique, but it's really driving home that fact that these people are really taking ownership of the brand. And when a CEO fails in the job, the employees have no ownership for the brand. The customers have no ownership for the brand. The employees start doing the bare minimum not to get fired, and the customers start moving to your competitors. So what can the CEO do, and what are some of the toolkit that should be used? So here, we're not looking at esoteric intangible elements when we're assessing the CEO's ability to manage a team. Like people might say, oh, well, you have to be trustworthy and you have to have empathy and all that. No, what I'm actually looking for in this case is physical structure that should be put in place in order for that team to be managed correctly. So I'll just present some of these. Well, before I get into that, let me just give you a case study of a high-end kitchen design manufacturer. So these people are bringing designer kitchen elements from Italy and then installing them into the Middle East. The CEO is constantly complaining that employees are problem aggregators, projects are having to be redone, the wrong product is being ordered, having to be reshipped out, installations are fearing a myriad of problems, and rather than solving problems on site, problems are getting kicked down the road and getting pushed up for management to resolve them. And the CEO is saying, hey, this person, these people are incompetent and I constantly have to be involved in operations. Well, who's really at fault? Remember, whenever you point a finger, you have, three pointing right back at you. And so these are the symptoms. And what really, when you start to realize that the CEO has no team building protocol whatsoever. There is no institutionalized performance management. There is no institutionalized mentorship. There is no formal policies, procedures, systems in place that are tied to incentives and controls. There's no succession planning. And when I say no vision and no strategy, if you ask the CEO, is there a vision and strategy? The CEO is going to tell you that, yes, there definitely is a vision and strategy, but that's irrelevant. What you want to do is you want to ask the frontline employees, you want to ask the staff, what's the vision of this business? What's the strategy of this business? If the staff cannot repeat or cannot tell you what the vision or strategy is, then it's completely there isn't any, because you can't execute something that you don't know what it is that exists. So these are very simple pieces that are in play, and it's kind of tantamount to when you watch CNN or the news and you see these you might show a war zone and you see a soldier holding a gun, that person's firing the gun. From the way they fire that gun, you can tell whether that's a trained soldier or not. Are they holding it wildly and spraying all over the place, or is it really a kind of professional approach? And so the structure and the approach that the person's taking to the team is very similar. It's telling you right away that this person is not an experienced manager that's using the right infrastructure to drive the team forward. So what are some of the key things that we want to look at? And maybe Pete can critique this, but do they have an infrastructure and a way and a process for setting long-term goals? Do they have a way of articulating the common goal of the team? And I'll talk about that. Is really about creating an institutionalizing process to allow the voice of the frontline employee to get into the boardroom, setting an agreed upon process. Your success metrics, we talk about that in almost every single session, so I'm not going to go into it in great details, but you really need to have the right metrics in place to monitor success. And when I'm talking about mutually accountable goals, oftentimes in an organization, two departments will have opposing metrics. Marketing wants to spend money, finance wants to cut costs. Good CEOs will remove that organizational inertia and make sure that we have mutually accountable goals. Strengths and weaknesses.
Let me jump in here. Talk a little bit about that. When you talk about removing that inertia, what is the skill specifically? What is then the work of that CEO, and how do you assess that in an interview context?
Sure. So I'm gonna cover that in point five. But you first of all want to see evidence or ask them, have you ever seen within your organization where the KPIs that are using between departments is actually causing friction or causing a conflict between departments? Can you give me an example of that and how you removed it? And so you want to see evidence that the CEO is cognizant that this can happen and that they have institutionalized processes to ensure that we have the same KPI systems across the board. And I'll walk into that a bit more. And so these are some of the challenges, that we have. We ask for teamwork, but we reward individual performance. We want innovation, but we punish failure. We want creativity, but we punish risk takers. And so it's not that obviously some of these problems are not solvable with the current knowledge that we have and the current management practices that we have. But I want to at least see that the CEO is cognizant that these are inherent problems and inherent conflicts that we have. And this can be a clear one, like, hey, the CEO wants innovation, but the HR processes and the incentive protocols are all driving individual performance. And you can see a lot of local organizations have this problem because they just have a net profit percentage. So they'll take their GM and they'll say, okay, here's your salary, and then you get a percentage of net profit. And that inherently creates a lot of issues because now they are not going to be incentivized to develop people. They're not going to be incentivized to create training. They're not going to be incentivized to do maintenance. They're not going to be incentivized to do any CapEx project whatsoever. So, so just to touch on how that actually plays out. So let's start with a very simple piece. Is if you can't set long-term goals, you pretty much will fail as a CEO. And a lot of times people get agitated with my assessment protocol because I start with high school. I start with grade school. And they say, Shane, that's not relevant. That's not relevant for a CEO. And I'll argue that it's very relevant because we are creatures of habit. You will be very similar in personality trait to the person you were in high school, to the person you are now, even if you're 7 years old. And a lot of the habits and problems that we have throughout our lives are just recurring over and over and over again. And understanding those patterns and working with those patterns as you get older, you get wiser, so I know that I'm an emotional person. So I know if I start to get heated under the collar, I'm like, Shane, you need to calm down, and you get better at managing yourself, but you're not going to change that trait. And so a simple question when you look at setting long-term goals, say, give me something that you accomplished in high school. Person says to me, Shane, I've always wanted to run a marathon. My graduating year, I ran the Boston Marathon. I ran whatever, the Toronto Marathon or the Sydney Marathon or whatever it was. Okay, fine. Now, what we want to look at again is about creating infrastructure. And what I mean by that is the systems, processes, policies, groups, committees around your goals. That's what I want to look for. So let's give an example of somebody who would score high on this trait for setting goals and someone who would just score normally. And so John, for example, says, okay, I'm going to run the marathon. First of all, here, I'll do my best, get my gym clothes on and my running shoes. After work, I'll run as much as I can. I'll eat healthy. I won't eat burgers and pizza anymore. Seems logical, fairly simple. That's what John's, going to do. And, I'm going to try to aim to run for 5 hours because it's, I'll try to do it in under 5 hours because that's a decent time. Someone who's really goal oriented, really has a high results orientation will be more like Sue, and they'll start asking us questions. Who are the best marathon runners in the world? Do they have a book? Can I read it? What were they wearing? Can I join a running club? who can I circle around myself? So they'll join a running club. They'll create a group of friends that are training together. They will research what the best diet is. They will be very meticulous about what their timing is, the way their training is. It will be much more empirical. And so when you look at this metric, you start to get an idea that Sue is now having an approach in her personality, how she approached setting goals and achieving goals. And it's about creating the right infrastructure around that success. As she becomes a manager and she matures, you fast forward, she's now 50 years old and she's meeting a team. She's going to use the same approach. Who are the best people in the market at this? What are they doing? What are the times? What are the industry benchmarks? How do I create that team? And John will most likely be managing his team the same way. And we've all worked under managers like that. Come on, let's do our best. And, hey, let's hit this. This is the strike zone for the result we want. Let's work towards that.
Yeah, and I think particularly, Shane, what's great about that slide, I really like it. I've liked it for a while, is the one on the left, orchestrates the system around creating the infrastructure, bringing other people in. And that's frankly what a manager does, versus John, who's potentially a great individual contributor. It looks like he's got a lot of self-motivation, a lot of desire to put in the effort, and that's fantastic. But that, when you're trying to pick the difference between someone who might be an awesome individual contributor versus someone who has the skills to orchestrate the entire environment, these are the type of, that's the type of evidence that you look for to draw that conclusion. So I've always liked this slide, and I really encourage people to kind of keep that in mind when they're best looking for the differentiation between just a highly motivated individual contributor versus someone who potentially has the ability to orchestrate as a manager.
And so, yeah, thanks, Peter. I like how you're orchestrating the success and creating that system. And so just before I get into this in a bit more detail, I just want to give you one caveat. So doing assessment is like being a crime detective. Maybe not everyone feels like that, but I feel like that. And so when you show up at a crime scene, here we have a body, we have a gun on the ground. It means that there's a statistical probability that the person was shot because there's a gun on the crime scene. Now, once you collect all the evidence, that may not be true because the person may have been poisoned and the killer shot the body after the fact or whatnot. So you really don't know what's actually happened. All you can do when you're at a crime scene is you can collect as much evidence as possible to have a statistically relevant prediction as to what happened. And more importantly, make a statistical prediction on what the killer is going to do next. And that's what we're going to do in an assessment, is you're formulating a statistical probability that the person, if they are a CEO, Sue might get into a CEO position and she might take all that stuff and not apply it because maybe she doesn't have the self-confidence, or she's second guessing herself, or, there's so many things going on with someone's personality. So it's just a statistical guess. So just because someone in early career or early development does not exhibit these traits does not mean that they won't be a great CEO, and doesn't mean that they can't manage a CEO. You have to take the full realm of data, not just one piece, and we have to add everything together. So I just want to make that caveat before, because people start to say, oh, this is really binary. The person didn't exhibit this, so it's not true. That's not the case. Look at the whole story. Do they have evidence of successfully managing large teams? That's going to be a crucial piece of data. So sometimes people, maybe they grow up in a more rustic, organic way and they develop a more systemic approach. Or maybe someone highlights it as like, yes, by the way, I'm bohemian by nature, so I have to make sure that I'm using empirical structure and I apply these frameworks, which I've picked up over the years, to compensate for my natural gap. That's something that you need to look at. So what we want to look at is some of the questions. Very simple question: what university did you attend? So you'll find somebody who's organic will say, hey, I applied to 10 universities and I got into one, versus someone else who said, look, I love physics. I want to be number one and I want to be a physicist. So I applied to the Imperial College of London because they have the number one physics program in Europe. And so you really want to see someone who's driving, has vision, has drive, and is setting goals from the get-go. And then these last two questions are very, very simple, which you can pick up on is, obviously if the person can't describe their current organizational goals, they're not going to be, it's going to be hard working for that person because you don't really know where their focus is. And I pick up here asking very specific, in Q2 2016, what was your targets? And because if somebody's setting goals and setting these targets, there'll be an emotional aspect to them. They will remember them. And it just starts to give you a very easy litmus test. They're very simple questions. These are not too difficult. The next one is understanding the common goal of the team. This always blows my mind because you have people whose goals are not in line with the business's goals. So for example, it's all about, as a good manager, you have to understand that it's not about the message that you're sending. It's the message that's being received that counts. So if I sit in a meeting and I say, guys, we're going to go sell oranges, and they walk out of there going, he likes citrus fruits. And, my cousin has a good deal on lemons. So why don't we get some lemons in here? And he said, no, I said oranges. No, it's oranges, lemons, limes. It's all citrus. It's all good. No, you want to really be specific, and you want to understand, what does the team understand about your goals, and do they believe in the strategy? A lot of times they don't even believe in it. I don't know if anybody saw this this image I have here of Crazy Frog. You guys are familiar with Crazy Frog? Anybody who has a 3-year-old will know.
Tell us about it, Shane. I'm not
Crazy
familiar
Frog.
with that image.
Okay, Crazy Frog, it was the most popular mobile download for a ringtone in the world for like 2-3 years. And then they made a cartoon out of it, and the cartoon has had like so many views. And it's based off of a sound that one guy made imitating his Vespa, and then an animator made the frog as a joke and submitted it as application to animation school. And then an advertising house got a hold of it, and they put it together and made it into this ringtone. And they hired the animator who originally created it on the team. But this guy thought it was a really stupid thing and that it had no commercial value. And he kept dragging his heels, and they were kind of pulling him along where he really thought it was stupid. So you'd be much better off getting an animator that believed in it, even though he was the guy who created it. So it's a clear example of somebody who, even the fact that they're the ones who created it, didn't necessarily believe in it, and it's going to slow you down. So another example, obviously we know Shoemart and Landmark. These guys have sold, I think, close to 20,000, approximately more or less 20,000 pairs of shoes a year, whereas a lot of the big shoe companies were hesitant to come into Saudi Arabia. So do you believe in the strategy, in the vision, and are you aligned with the common goal? Do you understand what the common goal of the team is? And so a lot of times you have senior managers who have staff members who want to quit or who don't really believe in it. For example, you don't go and start a professional football team and try to convince Messi and Ronaldo that you want to win the World Cup. They should come, they're going to come to the table. They already want to win the World Cup. So the belief in the strategy and what we're doing in the vision is already there. You have bankers who don't want to be bankers. You have people who, hey, by the way, I'm going to retire next year, so I don't really care what happens. So you really want to take time and understand what are the personal goals of your staff members, and you want to have that institutionalized. So in some people, when you have the performance management system, you actually have a form that says, list out your personal goals. What do you want to achieve in your personal life? And so on and so forth. So you actually have some form where you're sitting down, either verbally, orally, written, whatever it is, that question is stuck in. Hey, by the way, are you happy here? How are you enjoying your role? Personally, what is it that you want to do? Are you trying to lose weight? Do you want to live in Miami? Some people, they don't even want to be in the city that they're living in. So what's really the goal? Some people don't even want to be in the industry. They hate their industry. You want to have institutionalized process to pick that up. There's nothing worse than sitting with a CEO who's telling me how great his team is, and I know that 3 of their people don't even want to work in that industry anymore. And it begs your mind. So I just got off the phone. I just got off a call, literally, with the head of a private equity business, who, you know, was complaining that they're hiring people in Jeddah who want to live in Dubai. You know, don't hire people and and then they come home and they fly home on the weekend. You know, you're hiring someone who doesn't believe in the country, doesn't want to be in the country. Doesn't make sense. You got to let these people go. You're never going to hit peak performance with a guy who doesn't even want to be in the city that you've relocated him to. So I don't know, Pete, if you subscribe to that, or you inculcate that into your
No, I
performance
absolutely
management.
do. I think that's the key. Is the concept of aspiration is absolutely legitimate to ask, and to say, is there real alignment here between what I'm offering and what the person wants, right? And I think that's the key. When you think about the concept of discretionary effort, people will put in discretionary effort if they're really aligned and if they believe in what they're doing. You know, honestly, I think too many people here in this region and will take any job that pays them that amount of money, right? And if that is your point of view, if you're here in order to save up money to send back to your family back in Australia or India or Canada, many people will take, you know, whatever job they can get at whatever money, but will they perform at their peak? And what I would like about Shane's methodology here is that it really does help link back to say, I'm not just renting a person by the hour, but I actually want someone who can drive my business forward. And so that's why asking questions in this format really helps you identify it like that.
So then the next piece that we look at is making sure that the team has agreed upon approach. And this is actually where a lot of CEOs will fixate on setting the goal. So, hey, we want to increase revenue by 50%. And then people walk out of the, me and Pete walk out of the same meeting, and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to go call all my existing customers and try to sell them some of our other products in the company. And Pete says, I'm going to get on an airplane to Qatar because we're underrepresented there. And the best way to drive revenue growth is net new customers. So I'm going to bring in new customers. And then the third guy walks out, Julian walks out of the meeting and says, we need to create some new products. So I'm going to go create a new product because the best way to increase revenue is have a brand new innovative product. So you have, 3, 4, 5 different ways, and you're divided. So a simple question is, give me an example of a time you realize your leadership team was divided on how to achieve the vision and strategy, and how did you resolve it? A lot of times the CEO who will not be aware of this issue, or it's too difficult to resolve because they don't understand or they're not capable of bringing resolve. Sometimes it's not resolvable. Some people will just feel that, no, we need innovative products or we're going to go extinct, and they're not going to change. They're going to dig their heels in. Well, you're never going to get peak performance. You're never going to get that full stride, because now these two people, although they're in the same division, are going to be wrestling over, hey, we need to expend resources to get new clients. No, we need to expend resources to train our sales staff to cross-sell and get share of wallet with our existing clients. So these conflicts are very simple, extremely common. And when we're interviewing a CEO, we want to see evidence that, yes, he's dealt with this or she's dealt with this, she's aware of it, and she has processes, approaches, examples where it's like, yeah, this is a big problem, because it is a big problem. 100% it's a big problem.
No, and I just wanted to kind of talk here, Shane, about the difference between the what and the how, right? I actually find many senior leaders are really, really great at explaining, setting a vision around what can be achieved. But the most difficult work is aligning everyone around the how. And so that, exactly as Shane describes, you don't have 3 people coming out of the same meeting and say, yeah, I all agree on what we're going to do, and the how we're going to do it is, if you've got 3 different versions of how we're going to do it, what you then end up with is misalignment, is competition for resources, is duplication, and frankly, executing slower than you should. So I guess, Shane, could you talk a little bit about, how do you really, I mean, it's easy enough for someone to say, yeah, I aligned on the how and I got everyone together, but how do you really test for that to make sure that that person is willing to really go the extra mile to make sure everyone is pulling in the same direction, not just in terms of what we're trying to achieve, but the how we're going to achieve it?
Right. So it's really, I always make it tantamount to an army. So if you go to the army and you ask the general, hey, are we ready if somebody attacks us from the north? And then the general will say, yeah, anybody comes, we're going to wipe them out, guaranteed. And then you go and you visit the north and you visit the soldiers on the front line, and they're lacking ammunition and they don't have shoelaces in their boots, or and they're going to tell you like, yeah, by the way, boss, if anyone attacks us, I don't think we're going to do so well. And you can see the fractures on the frontline staff. So the CEO will tell you, so here's a live example. They're selling coffee, roasted coffee. And the CEO says, everything's great. We have perfect communication, and, we're going to, beat our budget. And then you talk to the sales guy and he says, it doesn't make sense because, one partner wants to sell coffee in the HoReCa channel and the other guy wants to sell coffee in the retail channel. And he's like, these are two totally different processes, two totally different customer segments, and they need totally different branding. And he's like, you can't take your HoReCa product and sell it in a retail environment. You can't take a retail product and sell it in HoReCa. So, this is not going to work. And so right away, you can see it when you talk to the front line. And the other thing is that when the person starts to say how, you really want him or her to start talking about the conflicts that erupted, and specifically. So say, for example, some people say, well, Shane, I'm not going to go track down the frontline staff and interview them as well. When you're doing a CEO search, you will do that because these are big appointments and you need to be sure about what you're doing. So, but say you don't have time. So then you would ask the CEO to explain in detail one of these vivid conflicts that would take place and how you resolved it. And if the person can't really get into the detail of it, it makes me feel like they didn't deal with it. So, so the next one is the success metrics. I talk about this so much that I don't feel like I need to go over for it. But a real simple one is, how do you define success in your company? And this is really, I think, the job of the CEO is understanding, defining success for the team, celebrating success, measuring and monitoring success, and what are the key behaviors that we need to do before. So again, you can see if you watch a boxing match or you watch the UFC or the MMA, you see some of these young fighters, they don't have their hands up. And they're walking to the fight, and the announcers themselves are like, oh, he's got his hands down. He's got a bit of a showboating. And, next thing you know, they end up getting knocked out. You don't see the champ, the person who's winning the belt running around doing that. Unless it was Prince Nazim, he was the only one I think who did that. But, Muhammad Ali always had his guard up. And, so you can see for what are the pre-behaviors that you want, get in the right stance, make sure that you have your call list ready, make sure you have, so what are these key behaviors? I want to understand and separate pre-success metrics versus post-success metrics. Any CEO who wants to talk to me just about revenue and net profit is really going to leave me flat, and it's really going to make me feel that they're not capable of pushing that team to peak performance. They don't really have the skill set to do it. And that's why they're not talking about it. And so we talk about those in other sessions. So I'll just leave it. So this is the part that Pete, you were asking me about, which is point number 5, setting mutually agreed upon accountability in these goals, accountable goals. So these are some of the classic conflicts that we're going to see. And these are just simple examples. The banking one is very common, where the head of commercial banking is pitted against the chief risk officer. And some very, wise banks, pitch the CRO into making sure that, hey, we want profitability and we want asset quality. And we don't necessarily, some CEOs, bank CEOs encourage conflict between the front office and the chief risk officer. And that's gonna inhibit your ability to cross sell. So other CEOs say, look, your job as the CRO is really to make sure we have quality assets, and make sure that when the head of commercial banking comes for approval, that you push them like, yeah, we're going to approve your loan, but you need to get 3 more products into the client, get them to agree to take on our credit cards or our XYZ, whatever they are. And start to remove some of that inertia. So another big fight, people want to have things on stock, and procurement wants to have things just in time. And how do you manage? Where do you strike the balance? What's the philosophy? How do you approach it? So these are the questions. Great CEOs, you can really optimize a business in here when you deal with these case studies where all of a sudden that guy's taking a business that's has a marginal net margin, has a 1-2% margin or is almost in losses, and next thing you know they have a 10 or 12% margin. It's really from closing out a lot of these pieces. So you just want to ask simple questions. Describe a time you realized 2 departments were not aligned. How did you resolve the issue? Describe a time you had to change the KPIs of 2 departments because they were conflicting. And the CRO is like that. For example, if you add to the chief risk officer's KPIs of a certain amount of accounts that you have to have cross-sold into, and that you have encouraged or suggested products into, you will start to see a change in the behavior. And making sure that mutual accountability is there. So, for example, what do I mean by mutual accountability? I'll give you a very good example. I just was attending the HRSC Summit, the largest HR event in the Middle East, and we had 3 days of presentations. There was not a single presentation the whole day about how HR drives revenue and net profit growth. And so talk about having not having mutually accountable goals. So how can you have the biggest HR event ever in the Middle East, and not ever, because obviously with COVID and everything, it was a little bit less attended, but the biggest event nonetheless, and not talk about how HR generates revenue? And I've never seen like, hey, by the way, why don't we start the HR discussion with, we want to increase sales by HR is doing to target that. And of course, I have a real CHRO here who should get his fire stoked at this part. So let's see if he has any slings and arrows for me after that castigation on the entire industry.
I don't think it's a castigation at all. I think it is a fair reflection, right? And I think it's the inclusive nature of, you get a group of people together who are passionate about a particular topic. It's natural that they look inwards rather than outwards. And that's why I think it's a shame that you didn't see any that were focused on revenue growth and business growth. But I think it's a natural tendency, right? And but part of that is, let's say the HR people themselves, but also part of it is the organization that they work in, right? If they work for a great CEO and a great leader, then they clearly see that they have a mandate to help the business to grow. I think often, even if the HR person is forward thinking, the CEO is just saying, yep, just run my recruitment process, run my payroll, and I'll be happy. And so that kind of visionary idea of let's bring in a CEO who has the ability to bring all functions together to achieve something amazing is exactly what we're looking for when we think about who's the right person to lead the business.
And I couldn't have said it better myself. And that's exactly what we look for in top performing CEOs, that ability to bring everybody together to a common goal. That is what great leaders, great managers do. And this is really management more than leadership, because it's really a tangible element. We're looking at the physical KPIs, the physical performance management system, the physical dashboard that's managing each department, and making sure that, hey, HR, by the way, you're going to have 3 KPIs to come up with, how you are going to contribute to our 20% revenue growth next year. And what Pete's saying is that the CEOs are, HR illiterate, and they're not coming to the table with that, the full idea of how HR can actually drive their success. which we talked about when we talked about how do you catch the Rainmaker CEO, the Rainmaker CEO session. One of the section was looking at how does the CEO utilize HR to generate revenue. And this one is very interesting, strengths and weaknesses. And this is one of the core jobs of the CEO. So what are the capabilities that we need to succeed at in order to have a sustained competitive advantage? And this has to tie into your vision and your strategy, and what are the core capabilities we need to drive as an organization. And that's on the macro level. And then maybe on the micro level, this is not necessarily the CEO's job, but it would be to the individual division leaders to, if you have people who don't have particular strengths and weaknesses, how do you mix that together? Or if somebody has a weakness area, maybe they would be better positioned in another place. That's not really what this is about. This is more about making sure as an organization, we are investing in developing the right strengths and capabilities. And of course, that does distill down to the micro level that, yes, we're going to need good salespeople, or we're going to need marketing people who understand the digital game, or we're going to need engineers who understand AI or whatever it is. Yes, that independent micro skill set is there, but we also want to see how to win on the top. And so here's some companies that do it extremely well. Airbnb says, hey, we're going to be a hotel business with no hotels. So the strength of that hotel tour, travel, and tourism business is the fact that we don't have any hotels. In fact, we're open source. Kareem, again, taxi, thinking about taxis in a totally different way. We're a taxi company that our strength is we have no taxis. Nike doesn't manufacture, to my knowledge. I don't know if this has changed, but back in the day, Nike doesn't actually manufacture any shoes. They always say that there was only 3 shoes that were ever manufactured by Nike, and that was the prototypes that they made in a waffle maker. And then they said, hey, for us to be successful, this is not the competency. We're not a manufacturing business. We're a sports company, or however they want to define themselves. This is some local examples. So if you go to Saudi Arabia, and you watch what I love, which is the coffee wars. And I'm just seeing if Isham is on here, because we have Isham is not joining us. Isham, actually, unfortunately, he caught COVID, so he is not able to join us. But Isham is the CEO of Tim Hortons. So when you go into the coffee wars in Saudi Arabia, you'll notice that Starbucks has, it costs them $1 million plus to make a restaurant, approximately, maybe less, maybe more. And they have these beautiful locations with couches and the wood paneling and all of this stuff. And so you say, okay, that's your competitive advantage. So they're both selling coffee, right? And Dunkin' Donuts comes in and says, we're just going to have point of sale kiosks. We're going to be in the gas stations. We're going to make these little shops where, it only costs us $200,000 maximum, probably even less, where you're going to have a tray for donuts and you're going to have, a drip coffee, and people are going to zip in to buy your coffee before you go on into the morning. So they said, look, our capability set is not having a craft kitchen where we're cooking you food or whatever. It's having locations. And now when you drive down the road, you see Dunkin' Donuts everywhere because of the strategy, because, first of all, they have that pink branding, so it pops out. And for every one Starbucks that you make, you have the CapEx to make 4 or 5 Dunkin' Donuts point of sales. So they populated the landscape. It's very interesting strategy. So you want to understand as a CEO, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? How are you going to play the game? And what do you kind of come to the table to? And there's no right or wrong answers. And I really want to see the CEO who can compare and contrast against the competitors, and where you're going to push, where we're going to push, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if you like that, because we all drink coffee, right? I don't know. Pete,
no, I've never thought about it like that. I'm a loyal Starbucks drinker, Shane, but I have not had not thought about the economics of that. So well done to explain it.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing is, right, a Starbucks person will not be caught dead in Dunkin' Donuts. And that's another case study where we talk about our branding. This is seek and seed leaders at all levels in the organization. This is bar none the number one thing that you want to do as a leader. and you really see companies that have been around for 100 years, and they're coming to the search firm saying, "Oh, we need a CEO, we need a CFO, we need a GM for Oman, or for our business in Jubail or the Western Province." And is the big question mark is, why have you been around for so many decades and you're not developing your own set of leadership? And inherent in that creates a major problem, because when you don't grow your leadership, you run the risk of having mercenaries at the top of your ship. And a mercenary is volatile. You know, if you're paying someone just to be your CXO, and you have any kind of black swan event that's very undesirable, that person can leave, that person can exit, that person can resign, versus having someone that, you know, is part of the family, that you have, you know, in the figurative sense, that you've grown, that you've developed, that you've paid for, you know, the company paid for their MBA, the company paid for their leadership development. That person has been in the business for 20 years. They're not going to leave, and they're going to stick with you. And you want people that are going to stick with you when you're under pressure, because mercenaries are fair weather friends. And, you know, they're around when everything's great and going well. And when if the ship takes on water and you're in stormy weather, they're the first to pull out. So not investing in this is a major risk, major problem. And I think, Pete, you said it really well. We were sitting there and you said, you know, when I was at P&G, we had no choice, because you had to hire your CXOs from internal the organization. So it made you really double think that, you know, we better develop these people because we're not allowed to hire from the outside.
No,
I thought that was
exactly
a brilliant
right.
policy.
Yeah, I mean, that discipline has served that organization well and served other organizations well. It promote from within. It's a great signal to the employees, because you know that if you do awesome, you can be promoted. But it really sets up that discipline that if the chief executive wins the lottery today and goes off and does something else, you don't have the option of going to Johnson & Johnson or Unilever and recruiting someone. So you have to have a whole ecosystem of development. And that's actually why, you know, companies like P&G, many CEOs of Fortune 500 companies started their career in P&G, and it's typically because they learned the discipline of people development at an early stage. And so, you know, there's many downsides of pure internal promotion, but the upside really is that kind of building the muscle of developing people is ingrained within the leaders. And, you know, frankly, that's where you have leaders who say, my job is to grow the business and to grow the organization at the same time, and not just have a situation where the leader says, I'm here to grow the business. Hey, HR or external coach or training provider, you go and grow my people, right? It is the way Shane is talking about it here around kind of personal advocacy and personal mentoring is exactly what we're looking for in this kind of process.
And I really like this saying, you cannot be promoted if you cannot be replaced, something my dad used to always say. And it really speaks also to the ambition and vision of the leader when they say, no, we don't need any more leadership. They're really saying they don't want to grow, they don't want to develop. And people who, because they're run by fear, they don't want to develop the person under them to take their job. It's also a direct statement about their own personal ambition and vision. So if I'm running UAE and I want to start working pan-regionally, I need someone to take over my responsibilities in UAE. If I'm running the Middle East and I want to work in Europe, I need someone to take over my responsibilities in Middle East, and so on and so forth. As you move up the ladder, and you get, you know, at the Acme, you have guys like Elon Musk, who are like, yeah, I need somebody to take over this company, you know, because I want to go to Mars, and I want to launch, you know, 6 more companies. And so as the ambition becomes, you know, insatiable, the thirst and hunger for leadership is also insatiable. So leaders don't often realize that when they say to me, oh, you know, I don't need anyone, I really say, okay, well, you have no ambition, you have no drive, you're content, your business has become a regional player or a local champion, and you're happy staying there. And trust me, you cannot grow faster than your team. You cannot grow, your company cannot grow its revenue if you're not growing your team. And so very soon you're going to have stagnated revenues, stagnated net profits. And then we're in it with globalization. It's grow or die. You're going to stop growing. You're going to start shrinking, and international global competitors are going to move in on your little local fiefdom, and they're going to knock you out of the game. And you're seeing that today. For example, if you went back 15 years, you had to buy Pirelli tires from the Pirelli dealer. I had a guy order Pirellis online and they shipped it to his house. So he's ordering Pirellis right from Italy. And I mean, obviously the government regulations at some point will close these gaps, these holes, but you're really under pressure from the global community. So this is an area where actually 95% of CEOs will fail the assessment. And it's always a great marker of a leader. Great leaders can be measured by the amount of leaders they create. So that is a quick overview of the 7 pieces that we look at. Just to give you an idea, if you like this stuff, the book is CEO Assessment Selection. It's actually, if you Google search CEO Assessment Selection, we are #1 on the top 5 spots, actually. This book is available on our website.
And I think you're still #1 on Amazon, Shane. Is that correct?
Yes, we are.
Well done.
And if you want a little more of a taste, you can go to our website, tpgleadership.com, which is down here in the bottom right corner. And you can download a free chapter to get a feeling of what it's like and how it would help you. And if you want more, we actually have the first certified CEO assessor course. That is a 2-day course, and I've assembled some of the best group CEOs and chairmen in the region to talk about how they select their CEOs. What is the protocol they use? This is a one-of-a-kind course. Never before have you seen, these people coming to the table. Iyad Malas, Group CEO of Majid Al Futtaim. Now he's the Group CEO of Al Ghurair. He has been selecting divisional CEOs for the last 15 years. And so you're going to get the theory from me. You're going to get the actual live tactics, from Iyad. We have the executive chairman and CEO of DMCC, Ahmed bin Salayem. So many, Isham, who's the CEO for Tim Hortons Middle East, Amin Husseini from Oman Arab Bank. And we also have Professor Christopher, who's the head of behavioral science and the CEO for the Dubai campus of SPJ Global. And you actually get a globally recognized certification issued by SPJ Global School of Management, SPJ School of Global Management. So there's nothing else like this on the market. So if you want, send me a message if you're interested in this. And feel free to download any of the frameworks. And we have a ton of free content on there. So maybe now I'll just take any questions from the audience. If we have, I don't know, I haven't been watching the chat box.
Yeah, let's see the chat box. Let's see if we have any questions.
Many large for operating.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's he's just agreeing, Santiago agreeing with our points.
Yep.
And so it doesn't look, does anyone have any questions? Nope, doesn't look like it. Okay, well, I'll stop sharing then, and we'll leave it for you guys. And there's no questions at all. If anybody wants to pop up and ask, these are just some of the quick things. So I would just quickly pop in and look at those 7 elements and look for evidence on those. Very simply, a lot of the companies don't even actually have any performance management. I don't know if you've found that, Pete, but
no, exactly right. That absolutely is true. And in fact, one of the things I'm doing now is putting performance management into the organization that I'm currently working for. But that's what you're looking for if you're going to scale a business. The person can't do it themselves, and nor just assembling a collective group of people together, that's not going to make it work. So then what I like about this whole content is it's all about putting the infrastructure, all about, working on the system rather than in the system. And I guess that's my final point, right? So many senior leaders get to that get from an individual contributor stage up into the middle management because they're the self-motivation. They're awesome at working in the system, at getting work done. But as you get more senior, you start working on the system, meaning your job is less to do the work yourself and more to orchestrate others to do the work. And so that's why this type of content or this type of approach, I think, really helps us, because you need to understand, if I'm going to be hiring someone, are they going to be able to work on the system rather than just work in the system themselves and try and get everyone to work harder.
Right. And when just to go backwards now and start with point number 7, seek and seed leaders at all levels. This inherently is the succession planning. And when I look in the market and we're interviewing people, the succession plan, they fail right from the get-go. So if you just ask a simple question like, what's the starting point for your succession plan? And for me, Pete, please feel free to chime in here. But for me, it has to be with your vision. The CEO and the chairman of the board has to say, in the future, we're not going to, we're a hotel business. And, in the future, we're just going to be a hotel management business and we're going to sell our brick and mortar hotels. So the vision is we're hotel management. So you need hotel management capabilities from the vision. And we don't. And so your capability protocol has to be sparked by the vision and then distilled down into the assessments that we're going to then go in. Then the CEO is going to interview the direct reports and the direct reports, and then do the gap analysis and say, based on the capabilities we need in the next 5 years, these are the critical gaps. And by the way, Sue, you're going to have a different program because your gaps are different. And John, your training program is going to be this because it's different, versus what you're seeing in the market is no talk about the vision. We're going to take an off-the-shelf capability matrix, stick it down the organization's throat. Then we're going to do an online 360 review where you get a link and you get to rate your manager. And then guess what? We're going to purchase from XYZ business school, the mini MBA, and everybody's going to get the same training. Now, that is not conducive to a succession plan by any shape or form. And, and so a very quick, 2 simple questions. What's the starting point for your succession plan? And number 2, give me a specific example of one of your direct reports. Oh, one of my direct reports is Sue. Okay, what was the finding for? How did you conduct the 360-degree review? What were her gaps? And what was the custom-made training program that you developed for her to close those gaps? And if you can't answer those questions, you're not doing succession planning, in my mind. Correct me if I'm wrong, Pete.
You are absolutely right. That is exactly it, right? I always love the frame, The vision drives the strategy drives the structure, and the strategy drives the capability. And it's the combination of structure and capability that end up driving your succession planning. And so, which I think is a great way to end. We are right up against the 2 o'clock deadline,
okay.
Shane. I know I've got to head up. I think other folks do. But as always, a great discussion. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Shane, for leading us through this great topic. I guess, Shane, final comments or questions or final thoughts from you?
No, I just, it's great to see everybody. I would highly, if you guys want to come to this course, it's a one-off, it's a global certification. Let me know. We'd love to have you there. And I just also want to thank everyone who supported us over the years and allowed us to get to this point. We never thought we would be #1 on Google. The book has been a huge success, and it's really thanks to all our clients who've given us these real live case studies. As you see, the Dunkin' Donuts stars, these are real live case studies from the ground. And the insights are really only a product of all the support and love that I've gotten from our clients, from my team. And so I want to thank everyone. And I want to thank Pete as well for making the time to join these sessions. Really great having you, Pete, and really love your insights. And thanks for everyone who's listening.
Excellent. Have a great rest of the day, everybody. Thank you very much.
Ma salama. Bye for now.